Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guest is United States Representative from Illinois' 8th Congressional District, Raja Krishnamoorthi. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can also get text updates about what's next for Politicon and Politics War Room by signing up at politicon.com. Tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please check out the links to our sponsors, 3 Day Blinds, Magic Spoon, and Quince in our show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors because it really helps make this podcast happen. Boy, you got a breath every day, James. The breakneck speed of actions of this Trump administration have several common threads. One, the rule of law is irrelevant. Two, make money, all the way from grifting to breaking the casino, taking the lead from Trump and Musk. And the effects on average folks, sometimes cruel, sometimes dangerous, be damned. Under what legal authority does Elon Musk enjoy to shutter entire agencies authorized by Congress, fire thousands without any process, and force access to the most personal and sensitive data of Americans? This ultimately may be stopped, but a lot of damage is going to take place. It'll be very hard and take a long time to reverse. One reform I can assure you Trump's not going to make is anything adversely affecting his billions of government contract. And Trump, as the Times reports, is working to get a PGA Saudis deal, which it happens he would benefit from financially. I'm going to make 2 points about the Musk firings, which include the FAA. Those have had no effects on the recent airline incidents. But as Jim Fallows, who in addition to being a great journalist is also a pilot and aviation expert, notes, if you lay off people who make air travel safe, you're inviting unsafe air travel. That's really rather simple. Two, there is a measles outbreak in Texas, and we have an HHS secretary, RFK Jr., who is a prominent opponent of vaccine. Three, Musk now has access to the Internal Revenue files. Now, it's a crime to improperly use or release any of that information. Do you think that'll stop him?
No.
If you're on Trump's enemies list, James, I think we agree. You better worry. And just if I spoke with IRS Commissioner John Koskin, former IRS Commissioner, served under both Obama and Trump, along with Sheldon Cohen, I think the best commissioner in my lifetime. And he said, apart from my concerns about safety and privacy and all of that, they could not pick a worse time to be meddling with the IRS. This is tax filing season, and this is going to mess up a lot of that. They threaten to really, really mess up the filings of a lot of average Americans. It's not going to affect the wealthy with accountants and lawyers, but it's going to it could potentially wreak havoc on a lot of average folks. They may be getting away with it for now, but ultimately a lot of this stuff is a disaster, James.
Well, disaster is hardly the word. First of all, we're living in a klepto state of staggering, breathtaking, far-reaching, penetrating corruption. And of course, Trump is totally corrupt. Look at everything he's done. Look at understand, Amazon paid, this is according to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. So everybody take a deep breath. The Wall Street Journal and the New York Post share common ownership. It's called Rupert Murdoch.
Right.
Fox News. $41 million for a documentary for Melania, of which, according to them, she's going to pocket $28 million. But we're not done with the corruption. They're going to sell credits, corporate credits, at $10 million apiece. So when they roll the credits at the end of the movie for $10 million, they'll include you. Now, this is Amazon, which owns the Washington Post. The corruption is so penetrating, is so deep, is so broad. And the only thing is that as corrupt as the Supreme Court? I don't know. It's a good discussion because the Supreme Court, in my opinion, is run by a corrupt cabal right in front of your face, corruption. And we can go through it if we want to, but that's what the era that we're living in. We're living in massive, staggering, breathtaking, penetrating corruption. All you got to do is look at Eric Adams. Look at that. Look at what's going on in the most important city in the world. And you'll get an idea. It's the Supreme Court. It's the city of New York. It's the executive branch. It's everywhere you see. It's not minor corruption. It's not part of the system. It's not the give and take that goes on. This is just stealing with both hands and both feet right in front of you. And the Supreme Court is included.
Well, the Eric Adams thing, which we discussed, is really, really outrageous. They conditionally pardoned him. They gave him a pardon. This is the indicted New York City mayor, who's, if you read the stories, it's an administration rife with corruption. And the pardon they gave him was, if you play ball with Trump, we'll keep pardoning you. But if you don't, Tom Homan, the Homeland Security czar / thug, came and said, I'll be right in your office up your butt. I've never quite heard of a pardon like this, but that's the way they play. I hope the governor of New York dismisses him. She has the power to do that. She ought to do that. He's brought tremendous discredit to the city. It may result in the election of Andrew Cuomo as mayor. I don't particularly like that, but it's a hell of a lot better than keeping this guy in there.
Well, I said on Roy Melba's show that she should run his ass out of there and speak up. And she calls me on the phone and F-bombs me to death about the process. And I said, Governor, I'm sorry. Process hell. This guy needs to leave the most important city in the world, and he needs to leave now. And if he wants to wait for the process to work, we'll take the process and shove it right up his stupid, corrupt ass. It's time to speak out against this goddamn corruption that's going on all over the country and in New York City. And Governor Hochul run his stupid ass out of there pronto.
Absolutely. There's so much here. He doesn't, obviously, Trump is a sworn enemy of any accountability, whether it's congressional or legal or anything else. And he's declared war on the press. The outrageous defamation suits against CBS, 60 Minutes, the Des Moines Register's Ann Seltzer. But it is working. It is already having a chilling effect. Disney capitulated on a Trump suit that he never would have won. But they got a lot of business dealings, so they gave him $16 million. Trump is banning the Associated Press. That's the gold standard of fair reporting around the world. Now, why is he banning them? He's banning them because they won't call his Gulf of America. They keep referring to it as the Gulf of Mexico, which most countries do. I mean, this is just extraordinary. And I'll tell you, his next target is going to be the most important press protection, which is the so-called Sullivan case of 60 years ago that really affords protection for investigative reporters and holds the powerful accountable. It's a myth that you can't ever win a defamation suit. You can. Fox was about to lose one last year. They drove Gawker out of business, but it's hard, as it ought to be. But they're going after this very, very soon. Trump and his gang, they love to talk about the First Amendment and freedom of speech, which they say is being denied conservatives. I think that's a reach. But they miss that part of the First Amendment that refers to freedom of the press. They're turning this country into Hungary on steroids.
Well, I got to say that the corporate media, which for the most part is the media, all right, there are notable exceptions, but just look at the Post, look at Amazon, look at the Los Angeles Times, look at Disney, look at Paramount, CBS, all right? Look at what they're doing. It's free press. There's some bastions left holdouts of free press, but a lot of the press is just acquiescing in this corruption. And maybe they feel like they have to. Do they have any idea? Does the Washington Post have any idea of what history is going to say about them? I don't know. I don't know if that they do. I don't know if they've thought that far. I really don't.
You know, when Obama foolishly tried to exclude Fox News from the so-called White House pool, all the other networks and wire services rallied behind Fox. They said, you don't have the right to do that. I'm waiting for them to rally behind the Associated Press. It was foolish what Obama tried to do. This, if anything, is even worse. But you're right. It's had this chilling effect already.
You hold out hope for them. I hate to say it, with some exceptions from this, but for the most part, the institution of, quote, the press, unquote, doesn't exist anymore. It's gone the way of the Supreme Court. It's gone the way of everything. Everybody is in on the corruption.
But James, you would hope, okay, it's bad here at home, but if we turn to foreign affairs, maybe it'd get better. It at least wouldn't be as bad. If you thought that, you'd be wrong. In Europe, Pete Hegseth, the eminently unqualified defense secretary, made what the Republican chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, called a, quote, rookie mistake. You know, if the HUD secretary makes a rookie mistake, it's a problem. If the defense secretary does it, it could be a crisis. At the same time, over in Munich, the administration seems to be warming up to the right-wing, sometimes neo-Nazi German political party that is a threat to finish as high as second in the next elections. But above all, there is an authoritarian ball going on in Saudi Arabia, where the Russians and Americans, with the Saudis as a host, are working out a peace deal for the Ukrainian war, which, by the way, Trump said the Ukrainians started. Somehow it was the Ukrainians that forced those invading Russian tanks and planes into their country. Both Ukraine and the Europeans, people don't realize this, the Europeans have actually contributed more to Ukraine's defense than the Americans. Both were stiff. They were not invited. A peace conference to end a war when one of the combatants is excluded. How does that work, James?
First of all, you go back to what he said. And I don't know why. I would never believe this, but I think Roger Wicker might be we're always looking for some principled Republican somewhere, but we never thought to look in Mississippi of all places.
Right.
He also said I don't have the words in front of me, but it in effect said it's idiotic to say that Ukraine started this war. Of course it's idiotic. We all saw what happened. But maybe Al Hunt's lifetime search for the principal conservative might have found a home in all places. We were looking in Illinois, and we were looking, all around the country.
Tennessee, Kansas,
Mississippi.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Secretary of State who's over there, Marco Rubio, was one of the really, really active advocates of helping Ukraine, a harsh critic of Russia. You think he'll keep that up, James?
Oh, Al, it's all corruption. It's everybody is paying everybody off. We have corruption in every branch of the federal government. We have corruption up and down the press. We have corruption not just in the usual places. It's literally everywhere. We're surrounded by a sea of total corruption. And I brought up the only thing we'll talk about a little bit in the show, but I am really starting to like the Democrats' position at least politically and in terms of what's coming up. But I don't know. And I think the Democrats will come back to power quicker than people realize. I don't know if there's going to be anything left in the country. I think they're going to steal it all by the time we get back.
It's going to take a long time to undo what they're doing. This is not a conservative or a liberal revolution. This is anarchy. It's trying to change.
The only guy over there that actually has some coherence to it is Bannon. That's it. I mean, I think he's a ethno-nationalist. He'd probably say he's the same thing. I find that philosophy to be utterly repugnant. But at least he's consistent. And he's the guy that's speaking more to the corruption more effectively than any liberal is. I mean, I'm serious.
He is. I don't like him. I don't admire him for the most part. But I think he is. You're right. He is consistent. And, there are fissures within this coalition of the ugly that Trump has put together. And one of them is going to be on trade and globalism. Elon Musk doesn't want to go after China. He's got a lot of business there, right? Yeah.
This thing is going to flame out so spectacularly. For all of the agony that we see and all of the angst we have and the getting up in the middle of the night and, all of the can you believe this shit phone calls, to watch that thing flame out is going to be something to see, and flame out it will, and it will not take long.
Well, if you were right, James, it's going to be enjoyable to watch because they deserve it, and we will be watching it every week.
Yeah, I don't know where we're going to be. I can't tell you, but I'm going to tell you I'm right, and it will flame out spectacularly.
Okay.
And it just I think this thing, and I would get in a conversation today, but there's one myth, and this is something that you and I agree on. I've been talking about this for a long time, and I'll take a little privilege here to go off and make something. I actually like Stephen A. Smith. I think he's one of the better sports commentators there are. When I remember the first time I saw him, which was some years ago, I said, this guy's going to flame out. This shtick is not going to last. And not only did it last, I find it entertaining. I thought it thoughtful and provocative. But I'll say this about Stephen A. Smith. He doesn't know a fucking thing about politics. And he ought to shut the fuck up about politics, talking about he may have to run for president because there's no talent in the Democratic Party. Are you shitting me? You're taking on the most talented right now, Stephen A. You're talking about the single most talented political party I've ever seen in my lifetime. You say you're a good friend of Wes Moore, who is an all-world talent. You said you've had Josh Shapiro on your show, is all-world talent. I could give you 5 other people to be on there. All right? The Democratic Party does not need you to run for president.
Right. Including our guest we had last week and our guest we had this week.
On television, all right? You can say what you want to, but you don't know the first fucking thing about American politics. I'll tell you that right now.
James, that's like Stephen A. saying, I may want to be an NFL quarterback because there's no talent among NFL quarterbacks.
Right.
Sure.
Right. I think I'm better than Josh Allen. I think I'm better than Lamar Jackson. I think I'm better than Joe Burrow. Yeah. I think I'm, better than Patrick Mahomes. That's what you're saying. But unfortunately, for the NFL, they put their best players on the field. For the Democratic Party, if you want to say the problem is we played our 7th-string quarterback, you would be right. But that doesn't mean that the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th string ain't still there.
Right.
They're there, dude. And they're going to come out of the woodwork in 2028.
Right. All right. This will be a ongoing saga, everybody out there. We're going to keep after this every single week.
Light up your living spaces with 3-day blinds. It's so good. I had to get up really early this morning because I happen to be in Atlanta. I'm on my way to Athens. And my wife has it. We have a smaller bedroom where it gets darker, and we got these blinds. And I did something I very seldom do. I had to get up at 5:30. I fell asleep last night at like 9:30. I feel like $1 million frickin' dollars. And it was so dark in that room. When I got up, I had to fumble around and find the light. The darker, the better. There ain't no doubt about that. No one wants to sleep in light. This shit is miraculous. And man, you can go dark, really dark, hardcore sleep.
Right, and nothing is worse than blinding light at the crack of dawn. Getting out of bed to close the shades, that is a real pain. You wonder, why is it already 2025 and my blinds aren't smart and automated? But we got good news. They are. They can be. There's a better way to buy blinds, shutters, shades, and drapery called 3-Day Blinds. They are the leading manufacturer of custom window treatments in the United States. And right now, if you use our URL, 3dayblinds.com/warroom, they have a buy one, get one 50% off deal. We can shop for almost anything at home. So shop for blinds at home too. 3-Day Blinds, local, professionally trained design consultants averaging 10 plus years of experience in providing expert guidance on the right blinds for you, right in the comfort of your home. Just set up an appointment and you'll get a free, no obligation quote the same day. We love that the expert team at 3-Day Blinds handles all the heavy lifting. Measuring and installing blinds can be a big challenge. So they design, measure, and install for you. That way you can sit back, relax, and leave it to the pros. Now, once we've heard about them, we knew it was time to upgrade. Their blinds come in tons of great style, so it's an easy sell on the family. With 3-Day Blinds, we're excited to be getting better sleep and opening and closing our blinds from the comfort of our beds. Alexa, I slept great. Now let there be light. We know you'll like 3-Day Blinds as much as everyone does. They have thousands of options and even give you actual samples, so you won't have to do any guesswork. Now, don't wait. Transform your home with 3-Day Blinds today, right now. Get quality window treatments that fit your budget with 3-Day Blinds. Head to 3dayblinds.com/warroom for their buy one, get one 50% off deal on custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery. For a free, no charge, no obligation consultation, just head to 3dayblinds.com/warroom. One last time. That's buy one, get 50% off when you head to the number 3, dayblinds.com/warroom. The link is in our show notes. Hey, James, our guest is Illinois Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, ranking Democrat on the Oversight Committee and the Select China Committee, and most importantly, one of our very favorite guests. Thank you, Congressman, for being with us. This has been a whirlwind month. You have expressed concern about the administration, especially Elon Musk's overreach, with DOGE getting access not just to Treasury payments and now the Internal Revenue Service and our tax records. Maybe I'm engaging in hyperbole, but isn't these the sort of policies to be able to use private, possibly incriminating information against political opponents that are the mark of police states?
Right. And I think that, this is one of those episodes, by the way, that provoked, I think, 1,000 phone calls into our office within a 24-hour period from people across the ideological spectrum, Al and James. It wasn't just Democrats. It was all kinds of folks who are just alarmed by exactly what you were saying. And it turns out also that some of these characters at DOGE are highly, highly suspect individuals. There's a guy named Marco Elez, Mr. Elez, E-L-E-Z, and a Wall Street Journal investigative report found out that this guy has been tweeting on X for months that we should, quote unquote, normalize Indian hate. He hates Indian Americans like myself. And apparently he was forced out.
Like J.D. Vance's wife.
Exactly. Well, here's the thing. He was forced to resign. And believe it or not, J.D. Vance and Elon Musk then got him rehired at DOGE. And so this is the type of thing that just makes people's blood boil. And it obviously hits home personally for me too.
Well, you and your colleagues your Democratic colleagues on the Oversight Committee a few weeks ago sent a letter to Deputy Inspectors General warning of potential national security risk posed by DOGE careless handling of classified material. Can you offer us any specifics of violating security protocol or mishandling sensitive information?
No, we're trying to get our hands on more information with regard to what they've done with this information. But what we know is that, we have not received any kind of information about them being vetted or having proper security clearance for some of the data that would require that. And certainly we haven't received any public disclosures with regard to Elon Musk, who's a walking conflict of interest, as you know. By the way, there's a separate controversy that's bubbling up right now about exactly what the heck is Elon Musk's status in the government. The White House claims that he is not the head of DOGE. He's not an employee of DOGE. He's not the administrator, in part because of certain lawsuits that say he would have to be confirmed if he exerted significant authority over an agency. Or if he was at a lower office, it would have to be authorized by Congress. So we have no idea what his official position is, but I think he's calling the shots.
Or who that young Indian American hater is actually working for then. It's a zoo. Congressional Democrats, I know you're upset about this, and many of your colleagues are, but I worry you're helpless to do much about it. Trump has dismissed the inspectors general. He doesn't care what deputies might say, and he and Musk have contempt for congressional oversight. There's clearly massive overreach, probably illegalities, but the courts take a while. They're going to get away with a lot, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that people that I talk to, when we talk about the courts and we talk about process, aren't swayed by that stuff. I think they are much more swayed in the kind of court of public opinion when we talk about, for instance, privacy, violating people's privacy. And also when we talk about executive orders that, for instance, freeze their federal funding. I think the federal funding freeze was an example of overreach where I do think that there's a massive hue and cry in the part of the public across the political spectrum, plus, elected officials, echoing that sentiment in unison. And at least I thought that was an instance of the Trump administration backing down. I think we have to kind of follow a similar playbook with regard to other issues as well.
Congressman, the foremost issue, probably enabling Trump's narrow victory last November, was the economy, kitchen table issues, yes. Inflation, how it's price of eggs. And he was going to solve inflation right away. What grade would you give him now, over a month into his administration?
Could you have a grade lower than F at this point? I think that groceries continue to go up in price at a dramatic clip. I actually, during an oversight hearing, pointed out the price of eggs is skyrocketing right now because of avian flu, the outbreak of salmonella, and the outbreak of listeria. And not a single executive order has touched upon those issues. And in fact, a recent executive order and set of instructions from the White House said, basically said, White House officials and executive office employees are not allowed to talk about avian flu. And so I think this is an issue that is going to continue to fester and that we Democrats have to talk about as well.
James Carville?
So, Congressman, first, in interest of full disclosure, the Congressman and I have cut a corrupt backroom deal. I periodically go on Zoom calls with his fundraisers, and he's agreed to help my grandson with his math homework. If you don't think this guy knows math, you might look him up on Wikipedia.
Who's getting the better end of that deal, James?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I love talking to you. Your group, you got a really classy set of donors, and they're very fortunate to have you as part of y'all's group. So, Congressman, there seems to be a split in the strategic direction the Democrats should go in, and this is particularly relevant to House Democrats. Some people say we have to fight them at every level, at every point, that this, Trump's going around Daytona and going around a track and going to the Super Bowl. He's dominating, and we got to hurry up and get in right now, and we got to fight him on the beaches, and we got to fight him on the hills, and we got to fight him in the cities and fight him on the street. And there are other Democrats who say they're going to not be able to produce anything remotely like a budget. And all we need to do is just lay back a little bit, as I like to call it, just play possum. All right, we got plenty of time.
Rope a dope.
What are the chances you think they're going to be able to pass a budget to be able to reconcile all of these massive tax cuts and all the other stuff that they're talking about without touching Social Security and Medicare?
I think the chances are minimal. And on top of that, they are absolutely going to gut Medicaid. They've said already that they're planning to cut Medicaid to the tune of $2.3 trillion. Just to put that into some perspective, that's almost 1/3 of Medicaid spending. And that would force tens of millions of people off the Medicaid rolls and their sole source of health care. And by the way, as you know, in rural areas and in many Republican states, Medicaid is absolutely crucial for making sure, whether it's a nursing home or a hospital is able to run in a rural area. So I'm very skeptical about their math to begin with, but also skeptical that they can pull this together. And yes, I think Democrats will have tremendous leverage in the end with regard to some of these issues, and we need to use that leverage effectively.
So let's try to frame this. Let's say we're just going to make up a typical Trump voter, but say they live downstate Illinois, small town, rural Illinois. They make $48,000 a year, have two elderly parents. Isn't Medicaid, doesn't that just matter to people in South Side of Chicago, inner city poor people, or would that have any potential adverse effect on what we're describing as a typical Trump downstate rural small town voter?
Oh my God, it would absolutely have a tremendous impact. I was just in Peoria, my hometown, yesterday.
Okay. You and Richard Pryor.
I'm sorry?
You and Richard Pryor.
Yeah, that's right. I wish I had his brilliant sense of humor, but like the most important thing to keep in mind is the healthcare system in Peoria, the healthcare system in many of these downstate and rural communities depend to the tune of like 40 to 50% of their revenue from Medicaid. Why? Because it turns out, believe it or not, 40 to 50% of births in the country are funded by Medicaid. 90 million people are on Medicaid, James, in the whole country, which gives you a sense of just the magnitude of people on Medicaid and the extent to which these healthcare systems depend on Medicaid dollars to function. So if you freeze Medicaid, you cut Medicaid, you basically are going to decimate these healthcare systems.
So Albert's old enough to remember this. I am too. John Ehrlichman asked the famous question, will it play in Peoria? This is not going to play in Peoria.
It's not going to play in Peoria. It's not going to play anywhere, man. It's not going to play anywhere. This is crazy talk, and my Republican colleagues know it.
You think they're aware of what this is actually going to do to their voters? Some of them are?
I do, and I think when we focus on those 20 to 30, let's say, most vulnerable Republicans, okay, that's where I think we Democrats have to hold them accountable. We have to make sure that they know exactly what's going to happen to them if they vote a certain way, and then we show them the consequences after the fact as well.
Albert?
Well, you got them in a squeeze because the Freedom Caucus, the right wing, won't go along with anything that doesn't slash Medicaid, maybe even more. And that'll be a death knell for many of those 20 or 30 you just described. It's going to be hard to satisfy both.
100%. I think that I think not only will those 20 to 30 vulnerable Republicans or marginal Republicans be in trouble, but all of a sudden you're going to have another group of Republicans who are going to cast votes who are going to become vulnerable because of this. I can't tell you how many healthcare administrators and others have sounded the alarm. They would have to shut their doors in some cases if these types of cuts happen. In that case, you have huge medical deserts at that point.
Congressman, you are the Democrats' go-to person on China. This administration talks very tough about China imposing new tariffs, a threat of more to come. They say that's simply fulfilling a campaign promise that most Americans support.
I think that strategic tariffs make sense. And as you know, the Biden administration put tariffs in those places where there was economic aggression, such as dumping goods beneath the cost of manufacturing them to drive American companies out of business, whether it was, steel, aluminum, glass, or solar panels, electric vehicles, and so forth. If you put blanket tariffs on everything without regard to either what change in behavior you're seeking or without regard to whether there's this economic aggression that I'm talking about, it basically means price hikes on Americans across the board and inflation once again. And so I think that's not necessarily a good way to go. And I think Americans will voice their concern very quickly if that's the way we're going to go.
Yeah, you, I think, have suggested that there are those in the administration that you basically trust on China, and there are those that you don't. Who do you think, who are those? Who are the people you trust and who are the people you worry about?
Well, I think, whether it's Mike Waltz or Marco Rubio, they have worked with me and others on China policy. They've been sufficiently tough with regard to trying to increase our economic, military, and technological deterrence with regard to aggression by the Chinese Communist Party. The people that I'm worried about are Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, and Elon Musk, who are on the other side of that particular issue. And I think they're willing to just cut any old deal to, basically pursue their own particular interests. And in the case of Elon Musk, there are tremendous personal interests that he has in China, especially with regard to Tesla, but also other ventures. What I'm really concerned about, Al and James, is that, basically Donald Trump is going to cut a deal with the Chinese that eases our export controls, eases our investment controls, which Biden put in place, and maybe even sells out Taiwan in the bargain in return for some promises by the CCP to buy more stuff, such as agricultural crops, even though they didn't do it the first time he made that deal in 2020. So it's going to be an illusory promise that we get in return for real concessions that we might make that might sell out our principles or our partners.
You mentioned trusting, or you mentioned Marco Rubio's, record on China. He also had a record for being very, very strong on Ukraine. Right. But right now, he and the other members of the administration are in Saudi Arabia trying to cut some kind of a deal with the Russians without the presence of Ukraine, a peace deal without one of the combatants. I mean, is this like Munich 1938?
It does feel like an appeasement moment, Al. And I think I hope that Marco Rubio and others, they can kind of get their backbone here. And if they need a spinal transplant, we should arrange for one, because this is one of those moments where we're entering into dangerous waters, as you know. I'm concerned that, basically these guys are going to cut a deal with the Russians that cuts out the Europeans and cuts out Ukraine at the negotiating table. And, oh, by the way, sends a very powerful signal to the Chinese that it's open season on Taiwan as well. So we could end up in a much bigger conflict, maybe in the Indo-Pacific and maybe even in Europe, because I think Putin he's not going to stop here. He's just going to go back, regroup, and then try for another NATO country potentially.
James.
So Congressman, and I actually think this is going to happen. I can't tell you the exact time frame, but 6 weeks from now, you get a phone call. It says Leader Jeffers on the phone. And he said, right, I just got a call from Mike Johnson. They don't have the goddamn votes on the debt ceiling. I know what he's going to ask me. Can I get him 50 Democrats to go along? What do you think he would have to happen to get any Democratic votes to extend the debt ceiling? Because you're going to get that call. I promise you, it's coming.
This is what I would say, which is I think we have to kind of use those votes to get certain conditions in place. I know that there's lots of things going on. We have to have some minimal conditions. I've been even toying around with, okay, do we just give them a debt ceiling extension of maybe every 30 days? And we'll see if they comply with.
Now we're talking. Yeah.
Well, let's see if they really comply with court orders, right? I mean, that's the fundamental issue, James, which is that would be a constitutional crisis on steroids if they were to defy court orders. And we're basically watching them and making sure that they comply with stuff like that. Obviously, Medicaid, there's no way we could possibly support them in cuts on Medicaid that they're talking about. There are other issues as well, but I think we have to hold them on a short leash, because if we don't, then we give up our leverage.
Right. I love the 30-day. I mean, if they need anything,
that's great.
Keep them on a really short leash.
The problem I see is if you give him any kind of extended time frame, watch out, because at that point he will. We've been complaining about the abuses that we've seen so far. Just watch for what he's going to do in the remainder of these 2 years before the midterms.
So I want to ask you a strategic question, and I'm not asking you this because you're an Indian American, because I think that's bullshit. But I do. I think it's bullshit, but I don't think that's the way you view the world. The India-China-U.S. relationship is really, really strategic. And how do you think U.S. foreign policy should account for India and its interests, and also in the many adverse interests it has to China? And I mean, it seems to me that that's a pretty big power game that we're going to be playing here for a long time.
It's huge, James. I see the India-U.S. relationship, along with obviously the Quad, Australia and Japan, as critical for setting the international rules of the road, so to speak, with regard to the Indo-Pacific region. And what I mean by that is China, for the longest time, has thrown around its weight economically, militarily, and technologically, because everyone wants to get into the Chinese market. They want a piece of the pie and so forth. But that's always been illusory. They've never provided that. And they've continued to practice aggression. India offers a chance for a much larger market, potentially, with a democracy, with the right demographics. Its country is still young, and it will continue to be young for a long period of time, meaning they're good workers and people who can do the necessary work to kind of propel our world economy forward. And we have to involve them in our economic and security arrangements going forward, because the CCP is, quite frankly, practicing a level of aggression which could lead to conflict. And they fear other countries coming together in an alliance, partnership, and friendship to constrain them. And really, that's the only way that we can constrain them.
Well, I'll tell you something. The two most important people in my life are Indian Americans, my nephrologist and periodontists, which are essentially All right, Alvin.
Also,
thank
your
you so
grandson's
much.
math tutor, too. Congressman, I want to thank you. I would say 2 years ago, one of the wisest people I've ever known, Frank Wisner, said one of the most impressive newer members of Congress he ever met was you, Raja. And I want to tell you once again, Ambassador Wisner's wisdom showed. You are a great guest. You're a great member. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thank you, Al. Thank you, James.
Always a pleasure. Yes, sir. Thank you. Start your day right with Magic Spoon. I keep coming back to the same thing. Damn, that stuff tastes good. I mean, it's like it actually tastes better than the shit with all the sugar and everything else in it. I don't know how they do it, but whatever they do in their lab or whatever the ingredients they pick, man, the person is a genius because the stuff is just it's almost addictive.
Well, you started the trend of using it for snacks and not just for breakfast.
Right. Listen, I very seldom eat it as breakfast cereal, but boy, it's just keep it in a bowl. And anytime you get hungry in the middle of the day, it's really good, and you don't even feel bad about it.
Well, if you've been listening to us, you know we're big fans of Magic Spoon's high-protein cereal. Now we have exciting news. Magic Spoon turned their super popular high-protein cereal into high-protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like classic crunchy cereal bars. Magic Spoon's treats are delicious and have become our favorite on-the-go snack. James loves them after a run. As he told you, he snacks with them. He'll even double down with a bowl of cereal on occasion while he's working. I have good news for you, James. You might be able to add in some more variety because Magic Spoon is also launching a brand new high-protein granola. True to the Magic Spoon promise, it's packed with protein and is so crunchy and sweet, it's perfect for breakfast or a snack at any time of the day, especially as a delicious pre-workout meal. I got to send that one to my grandchild. Now let's get into the macros. Magic Spoon's high-protein treats are crispy, crunchy, airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. They come in mouth-watering flavors like marshmallow, chocolate peanut butter, and dark chocolate. Now, if you know me at all, well, you know I'm going for the chocolate peanut butter every time. But you have a lot of choices. Then Magic Spoon's brand new granola packs a punch with 13 grams of protein and 0 added sugars. They come in the delicious flavor honey almond and peanut butter. The crunch is so satisfying, and it feels great knowing that we're getting a big serving of protein and staying carb conscious while getting to enjoy Magic Spoon's great taste. Right now, we have a deal for you. Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/warroom or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/warroom for $5 off. The link is also in our show notes.
I tell you, that granola, I do this a lot. If you take the granola and you top it with strawberries, with some kiwi and banana, make it look like the flag of Italy. You talk about a combo with that granola, it'd be the best breakfast you ever had in your life.
All right, James, now for the outrage of the week. You know, there have been scores, no, hundreds of studies on voter fraud in America. Virtually all draw the same conclusion. Voting fraud is virtually not existent, infinitesimal. In his first term, Trump appointed a commission to uncover all these voting fraud scandals. They shut down after finding none. But the political right won't give up, feeling it's a winning issue politically, especially when they rail about, quote, illegal aliens, end quote, flooding the polls. You know, why, James, would an undocumented immigrant who is already scared stiff risk apprehension by trying to vote when they're likely to get caught? The answer is they don't. Yet House Republicans again are pushing the so-called SAVE Act, which would require all voters to show birth certificates or passport IDs. The Brennan Center reports almost 10% of voters don't have either. The act also would impose criminal penalties on election workers. These are such unsung heroes in America who supposedly don't properly vet voters. Another way to intimidate them. And James, I want you to listen up, because if someone marries and changes their name, and that's not reflected in those IDs, they may not be eligible to vote. Imagine if you were James Madeline and they didn't let you vote.
You were Al Woodruff. Oh, man. This thing, I keep coming back. It's going to collapse, and it's going to collapse soon. There's no talent. It's just the game. Now, the question is, do they collapse before the country? That's the scary thing.
And how much damage they do in the process.
Yeah, right. For my outrage, what I'm very into is public corruption that they're doing right in front of you. And we referenced the corruption of Amazon and the Trumps and the $41 million documentary, but selling $10 million credits. One of the most corrupt, stupid, jackass things that we've come up with a nation, and a lot of people have it, is something called, quote, school vouchers, unquote. You talk about some shit that doesn't work. This is some shit that doesn't work. I just saw something in Louisiana where it tested people that go to public schools and the voucher schools. And usually when you see these education studies, maybe it's 5% better in one than the other, and they draw, these conclusions. It's not even close. They spent $50 billion, and these kids these voucher schools are horrible. However bad you think the public schools are, and you've been sort of relegated to think that, and everybody starts with the premise that all public schools are bad, which is total bullshit anyway, but that's what we've come to. And I think these charter schools, we have them in New Orleans. I think they work fine. They're part of the staff to do certain things. They got to jump through certain hoops. I don't have a problem with that. The voucher thing is the most corrupt, ill work. And it's not that it doesn't work. It actually has horrible adverse effects. And I want to get Josh Cowan, he was a former Clinton guy, War Room guy or something. He's at Michigan State. And he is one of the best education researchers there are. And vouchers are one of the great frauds that's ever been perpetrated on the American people. It really is. And they do it right in front of you. Right in front of you.
James, what's his name again?
Josh Cowan. And we'll probably get him in late August, early September, when to be a little thematic or something. And he studied this shit backwards and forwards. There's literally no other conclusion to draw other than these things are just some giant scam. I think Louisiana spent something like $50 billion on it in a state that don't have $50 billion to throw around for anything.
Boy, that's for sure. Wow. Okay, we'll have more next week. I'm sure there's no shortage of outrages these days, James.
They ain't gonna run out of outrage. I think we ought to change this segment to, can you believe this shit?
we may want to add a part to that. You're absolutely right.
Most of my telephone conversations start with that. Now, when I pick up the phone, can you believe this shit, James? Yeah, I believe it.
You wouldn't believe what they just did.
Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah, I actually do.
Oh, God. So I got that call yesterday. You wouldn't believe what Trump just said. Oh, I said, oh, my God, what did he say? Ukraine started the Russian-Ukraine war. And my first instinct was say, of course he didn't say that. But then I realized, of course he did.
Should have never attacked that radio tower on the German-Polish border.
Yeah. Oh.
That's why Hitler had no choice to attack the radio tower.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh?
Okay.
Step up your style with Quince. I wish they had, I could think about, compared, I look at the prices and the quality of what they had, and I think about when I was a young man, this shit's about 95% cheaper than anything you can get. Generally, textiles are some of the most ridiculous markup of anything in the world, and these people are selling you really quality stuff. I mean, high quality stuff for a pittance of what you would pay if you go to one of the more established men's clothing retailers.
Yeah, because elevating our style, it used to mean breaking the bank. But with Quince, you can get high-end, versatile pieces at prices you can actually afford. Now we can upgrade our style by snagging killer luxury essentials that sync with our vibes and wallets. Quince has all the must-haves, like Mongolian cashmere crewneck sweaters from $50. A cashmere sweater for $50. Iconic 100% leather jackets, versatile flow knit activewear, and more. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. The best part is that all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Now, we love how Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. After checking them out, we think everyone needs Quince's Mongolian cashmere sweaters. There's nothing better for looking your best, even when the weather is cold. And if you're prioritizing fitness this year, there's no better workout motivation than some new activewear. Our Quince favorites are the luxurious Mongolian cashmere cardigan sweater and the stretch wool dress pant. The materials feel amazing, and they are the perfect combo for looking good and keeping warm. The style is perfect for getting things done on the hill, reading in a recliner, or making an impression at a dinner party. Even at our age, we sometimes like to make an impression, James. You find your fit and indulge in affordable luxury. Go to quince.com/warroom for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/warroom to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Again, quince.com/warroom. The link is in our show notes.
Do me a favor, go men's clothing and then go cashmere sweater and see what you're going to pay and see how far north of $50 it is. And you'll get an idea of what a freaking value this is. I had one cashmere sweater I bought back in the 90s. I still love the way that thing feels. I thought I had a hell of a bug. I was paying $150 for it in $1997. You can imagine what it is today. This stuff is remarkable, man.
Now for our listener questions. Boy, there are a lot of good ones. John in Chicago, Illinois, James, says, we've never had a lawless president in this country. I think that's essentially right. Do you have confidence in our military, which has a duty to uphold the Constitution if Trump defies the courts? Good question, John.
It's a great question. And so I'm General Admiral such and such, all right? I've sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution says Trump is the commander-in-chief, all right? The Posse Comitatus Act, something like that, says you can't use the military for domestic, whatever. I don't know how I would advise him. What is your constitutional duty? Because it's clear that he is commander-in-chief. He has that. That's not a made-up power. That's a specific grant of power from the Constitution of the United States. So I'd love to get some people who will go a lot deeper than this than we possibly can on, and it's going to happen. They're going to get a contradictory order, one that is in clear violation of one provision of the Constitution if you obey it, in a clear violation of another provision of the Constitution if you disobey it. And I think that's something that's why this show exists, to anticipate these questions and to see if we can come up with an answer, because I don't have one right now.
Yeah. Carlton in Granite Falls, North Carolina. asks, how do you rank Democrats' chances in the Senate races in Georgia and North Carolina, in addition to the former's gubernatorial race? Well, of course, the North Carolina has elected their governor, and Georgia, you're right, is the former. They do have a gubernatorial race. I don't have any idea who's going to be running for governor in Georgia. John Ossoff has turned out to be a pretty effective senator. I think Warnock is the star senator, but Ossoff, I'm told, works the state very hard. It'll be tough. It's a tough state. I don't know who the Republicans will nominate. It may well be he'll get lucky and some crazy right-winger will win the primary. But right now, I would think in an off-year election that Ossoff is a slight favorite. In North Carolina, if Roy Cooper runs, and I think it's at least 50-50 he will, Tom Tillis is toast.
Well, okay, I would call this the governor's elections in Georgia and North Carolina. If Roy Cooper, who's at Harvard right now, decides to run, I think chances are very good that he would win. Mm-hmm. If Brian Kemp doesn't run for the Senate as a Republican, Ossoff's a lot stronger than people think. And I don't want to talk about it now because I'm going to meet with him tonight. But we got a potential Democratic gubernatorial candidate that you're going to love. And if I'm going to speak to him tonight, and if he's serious about running at some point, I want him on the show because he's so good. I think he's great when I talk to him, but on paper, he might be the best gubernatorial candidate of any party that we could possibly have.
Can you tell us yet who it is?
Huh?
Can you tell us yet who it is?
I will after I meet with him. I'm sure he's going to be fine with me saying it. But
okay.
I'd rather not
say
his name until I meet with him and help him. But boy, we'll talk about if he's where I think he is. We damn sure are going to talk about him and talk about it a lot. And the other thing I'm very high on is our Democratic Senate candidate in Mississippi. Sometimes there are opportunities that are coming around, and Mississippi and Georgia are potential Democratic states. We can keep the Senate, and we might be able to, maybe 35% chance we could pick up. And it's not Wicker; it's Cindy Hyde-Smith, who's like dumber than concrete. So if we can, I think we got a shot at concrete in Mississippi. We might be able to beat them.
Beat the concrete. James John in Tempe, Arizona says, because you've discussed this, is there anything we can do to counter Steve Bannon's flood the zone strategy?
Yeah, just keep letting them. Understand what he said. We're going to flood the zone with shit. Okay, that's the exact quote. What Bannon said. And you know what? I think people are starting to wake up. If you look at it, I just saw one, but I think it was Reuters, but Trump's approval is already down, already starting to drop. And when people realize that they flooded with shit and they're getting flooded with shit, they're not going to like it. And I think for me, I'm a big believer in this. We got to play possum. Just let the shit come in. And it's not, I'm not talking long range strategy. I think this thing is going to collapse much sooner than anybody else does. And just in our conversation, they're not going to be able to cobble the votes together for the debt extension or to get any kind of budget resolution or whatever reconciliation, whatever bullshit they do. I actually think that one of the great myths, and take a second here, is that the Democratic Party is completely without talent, without anything. I think we have a lot of talent, but we had an unfortunate cycle. We've gone through that many times on the program, but the reason of it is, I don't need to rehash that. I actually think that we're in a good position right now, and this position is going to do nothing but improve. And if you listen to people like Raj, all right, you listen to, you read the interview they had with, Ruben Gallego, and you look at the talent that we have and the talent we have on the beach. I am a big believer in the future of the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, I'm not that big a believer in the future of the United States of America. That's my real worry. My real worry is not the Democratic Party. It's the fucking country.
Yeah. Bob in San Diego asked, what's the status of the state cases against the fake electors in Michigan and Arizona? I am almost sure, Bob, that those are continuing. certainly not against Trump, but there were fake electors in both those states who have been subject to criminal charges, and I don't see any reason that those are dropped. I mean, Trump is immune, but I don't think they are, and I think those are cases with considerable merit.
I think they have unbelievable merit, and just think of this: if somebody was told you 10 years ago, fake electors, who the what? But my problem is I have less than zero confidence that the Supreme Court is anything other than a corrupt institution. And when you have that level of corruption, they might say, if they say the president can't commit a crime, which is everything they ever learned from the first grade through law school, is no person is above the law. See Nixon versus the United States. Bill Clinton had to testify in bullshit sex deposition while he was president. I think the Supreme Court is so breathtakingly corrupt, I wouldn't put anything past them.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. The next question is one which you're going to love, James, because it's from Tate in Blackstone, Virginia. Tate wants to know, do you think Abigail Spanberger should campaign, she's running for governor, hard in rural Virginia to try to capture a portion of that disaffected Trump vote?
Well, as you know, I spent a lot of time in rural red Virginia because Mary and I have had a place for the last, I don't know, 1995. I guess it's 30 years now. Mm-hmm. And look, Abigail Spanberger is a really qualified CIA agent. She's a member of Congress. She's very, very ethical. I think she would have, and we're talking about doing better in rural Virginia. You're talking about doing better in Shenandoah County. Like if you get 32%, man, you've run the table. But I think that's possible. I think we have a really good matchup here. I'm very excited about the Virginia governor's race. I think we can cut in the margins in counties, the kind of places that we're talking about. And I think we're going to just roll the vote up like unprecedentedly in Fairfax and Alexander City and places like that in Northern Virginia, because they're just hundreds of thousands of federal employees there, and they're not happy. My dad was a federal employee. He was a postmaster of a third-class post office in the United States. You can't be any more of a, mid-level bureaucrat than that, if you want to call it mid-level.
James, I'm going to read it. This is a question I actually got on Substack from a Patrick Walker, who subscribes to Politics Forum. He says, I love your guys' podcast, but you keep talking about this deep bench of Democrats. Where is it? Musk and company are taking over the government. It seems like we're in our bleakest time, second only to the Civil War, and Democrats are impotent. Patrick, Democrats are in the minority. Elections matter. They lost elections. There's not a lot they can do other than try to hold Republicans' feet to the fire, hold them accountable. As our guest said earlier, use leverage. I think they'll do that. And I think, they have to bide their time. That's not a great answer, I know, Patrick. But if you want to talk about that bench that you seem skeptical of, I'll just give you some people. Wes Moore, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, Andy Beshear, Gavin Newsom, governors of states. Our guest last week on this show in the Senate, Alyssa Slotkin. Boy, there's so many more I haven't touched on. This is a great field, and this is going to be a rough time. But between the Virginia governor's race this year and then next year, the House races and maybe the Senate, things are going to turn around.
It's a question. I understand where you're coming from. And, of course, this is I started progressive interest groups were out protesting something in Washington, which is typical progressive interest groups protesting something in Washington. I mean, you couldn't get these assholes out of Washington if you tried. It's not that they're useless are harmless. They actually have an adverse effect on the party. I have no fucking idea why anybody gives any of them any money, but that's my own view. When I think of the Democratic bench, first of all, you haven't seen them play yet. Al and I, a little bit different. We'd be like assistant coaches or scouts. We've seen these people play. We follow them in state elections. And man, I don't want to start naming names. I'll name some. All of them obviously talented. I could name just as many as that I think are just as talented as this. And I know it takes a lot of faith. But I think right now, our strength is our bench, and I think the time is to play possum. Not for long, but I think it's going to come to us. You know, when you teach baseball to people, you always let the ball come to you. Don't, if they hit a line, you're the shortstop, you're the second baseman, don't try to get ahead of the ball. The ball is going to move faster than you can move. And the best way to field it is don't rush the ball, let it come to you. That's what we have to do. We have to let the ball come. And believe me, the ball is coming to us. And we got the kind of people that can field it and field it well.
No, I think you're right. God, we love those questions. I'm sorry I couldn't get to more of them. Keep them coming in because it's a key part of this show. And James, I have one more. This is important.
Okay.
One more. This is, I want Professor Carville to put his cap on. Maybe it's the Reverend James Carville because it's from Michaela in Iowa. Michaela, next time tell us where. She says, can we recover from Trump's second presidency or should I give up?
The first part, I'm not sure. The second part, no. I literally am worried that the destruction that Trump and they're going to do, and the destruction, and don't forget the Supreme Court. I am not totally confident that we got to get out of this thing in any kind of good shape. But of all times, now is not the time to give up at all, at all. I mean, we're literally fighting for the survival of the country.
No. Boy, James is absolutely right. Don't you dare give up, Michaela. And I am mad at some of those fat cats where I read in the New York Times, they're saying, I'm so depressed by the election. Some of them are scared of Trump's, that they're pulling back. Well, the right wing, the Republicans didn't do that. In 2021, after a election defeat where Trump screwed up, they doubled down. And whether you're Michaela out in Iowa and you're, working the grassroots, or whether you're rich in California or New York or Texas or wherever, it's time to double down. There's the real danger to the country.
Yeah, I wish I had more optimistic views on it, but we do. I think if we're smart, I keep coming back to this. Trust me, we have a lot of smart people. We just hid them from the American people, but I don't think I hope we don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. As always, send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, 3 Day Blinds, Magic Spoon, and Quince in our show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and check out our Substack at politicswarroom.com. James and I are constantly adding new content, so go take a look. You can also find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. Remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.